The night had settled over the city like a velvet curtain, but there was nothing soft or gentle in the air. Smoke curled upward from the streets far below, where gunfire had already painted the concrete with streaks of chaos. On a rooftop overlooking the central square, Lieutenant Elena Vasquez crouched low, her sniper rifle resting lightly against her shoulder. Her partner, Sergeant Mia Chun, had been supposed to cover the eastern alley, but a sudden explosion had thrown her off balance, and Elena had watched helplessly as she disappeared behind the rising smoke. "Mia," Elena whispered into her comm, but the crackling static was the only reply. The enemy had them surrounded, and reinforcements weren't coming tonight. Every nerve in her body screamed to retreat, to find cover, to leave the mission behind. But she knew better. Retreat was not an option. Completing this operation alone wasn't just about the mission. It was about honor, responsibility, and saving the civilians trapped below. From her vantage point, she could see shadows darting among the wrecked vehicles and debris. Each movement could signal an enemy patrol. Each glint could be a sniper waiting for her mistake. Her fingers tightened around the rifle stock. She adjusted the scope, her heart hammering not from fear, but from calculated intensity. Every breath had to be measured, every movement precise. She had trained for this. She had lived for this. And now the test was real. The first target emerged near the corner of a shattered storefront. Elena held her breath, aligning the crosshairs with meticulous care. She exhaled slowly and squeezed. The shot rang out, echoing across the empty streets, and the figure fell silently into the shadows. A small victory, but a necessary one. She could not afford hesitation. The enemy was adapting quickly, closing in from multiple sides. Her comm crackled again. A faint voice from another operative miles away reminded her of the time pressure. Every second counted. Every heartbeat could be her last. She scanned the streets, mapping the enemy's movements in her mind. Two figures were approaching the eastern stairwell, her partner's last known location. Elena's chest tightened at the thought of Mia down there, alone or worse, injured. But she shook the fear off. She had to act. Sliding quietly to the edge of the rooftop, Elena spotted a fire escape that would give her access to the building below. One misstep, one loud footfall, and she would be exposed. Her boots made no sound against the metal stairs, her shadow blending into the night. As she descended, the smell of smoke, dust, and blood filled the air. Civilians screamed somewhere in the distance, their voices drowned out by the sporadic gunfire. She reached the alley and peeked around the corner. The enemy had set up a makeshift barricade, covering the exit routes. Elena crouched low, scanning the angles. Her mind worked faster than ever, calculating bullet trajectories, enemy positions, and potential escape routes for civilians. She knew she couldn't take the same route as before. It would be predictable. Her eyes landed on a pile of crates stacked against the wall, providing perfect cover. She moved, fluid and silent, rifle raised. A sudden noise, footsteps approaching, froze her in place. She held her breath as two guards came into view. Her shot was precise. Both went down without alerting the others. One step closer to the civilians. One step closer to completing the mission. Her muscles burned, but adrenaline kept her sharp. Time was slipping away, yet she could not afford panic. Every movement was methodical, every decision calculated. At last, she reached the eastern building, peering into the shattered windows. Smoke and debris filled the rooms. A faint groan caught her attention. "Mia," she called softly. The groan turned into a weak cough. Relief and urgency collided in her chest. Mia was alive, trapped under rubble near the stairwell. Elena didn't hesitate. She ducked under the broken doorframe, dodging falling debris, and reached for Mia's arm. "Hold on," Elena whispered, lifting her partner as best she could. Every second felt like minutes as the enemy's patrols closed in. Sweat mingled with blood on her face, but she ignored the sting. The mission demanded focus. Every movement had to be calculated. She dragged Mia toward the roof's emergency ladder. Behind her, enemy reinforcements were approaching. Gunfire erupted, bullets pinging against metal and concrete. Elena returned fire when necessary, covering Mia's escape with unflinching precision. She was alone now, not just completing a mission, but carrying the weight of responsibility for another human life. And she would not fail. Not tonight. Finally, she and Mia reached a safe rooftop perch. Elena called in coordinates to the extraction team. A faint light appeared in the distance, a helicopter, cutting through the smoke and shadows. She guided her partner toward the edge, her hands steady despite exhaustion, pain, and fear. Every second counted, but her resolve was unwavering. The mission would be completed. As the helicopter descended, Elena glanced once more at the city below. Chaos and smoke, fear and loss, but also courage and perseverance. She had gone alone, but she had carried not just her partner, but the honor of her unit, the lives of the civilians, and the mission itself. Tonight, the impossible had been done. The rotor wash of the approaching helicopter stirred dust and debris across the rooftops. Elena tightened her grip on her rifle, scanning the surrounding buildings for movement. Every shadow could conceal an enemy. Every flicker of light could mean the difference between life and death. Her partner, Mia, leaned weakly against her shoulder, injured but conscious. The extraction was close, but the city had other plans. Suddenly, a sniper's muzzle flash lit the corner of a distant rooftop. Elena didn't flinch. Years of training had honed her reflexes. She returned fire, precise and lethal, taking down the hidden shooter before he could adjust his aim. The city was alive with danger, but she moved with the certainty of someone who had faced death before and emerged unbroken. Bullets ricocheted off metal railings and shattered concrete, the sounds deafening yet oddly rhythmic. Elena guided Mia toward the extraction point, moving from cover to cover. Her mind raced, calculating angles, timing movements, and anticipating enemy patrols. Every footstep, every breath, every heartbeat mattered. Suddenly, a group of armed men appeared from the stairwell of a neighboring building. Outnumbered, Elena had no choice but to hold position. She crouched behind a low wall, rifle trained on the advancing enemies. Her eyes flicked between her scope and her surroundings, planning her next move with surgical precision. She fired, taking down the first wave before they even realized where she was. The helicopter hovered closer, its searchlight cutting through the smoke-filled night. Elena signaled with a hand, guiding the pilot to the rooftop. But the enemy was relentless, pushing forward with brutal efficiency. Elena had to create a path. She moved with lethal grace, each shot calculated, each movement precise. Her heart pounded, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. Mia gritted her teeth, trying to keep pace, leaning on Elena for support. "We'll make it," Elena whispered, more to herself than to her partner. Her voice was calm, even soothing, though inside, every nerve screamed with urgency. They reached the edge of the rooftop, and the helicopter's ladder descended, swaying in the gusts of wind and rotor wash. The enemy continued to advance, but Elena's focus never wavered. She covered Mia as she climbed onto the ladder first, then followed, firing over her shoulder when necessary. Bullets struck metal and concrete around them, sparks flying dangerously close. The air was thick with smoke, sweat, and tension. Every second was a battle, every movement a decision between life and death. Finally, they were both aboard the helicopter. Elena provided cover from her rear, keeping watch as the aircraft lifted off the rooftop. Below, the city stretched in chaos and destruction, but from above, there was clarity. The mission was complete. Her partner was safe. The impossible had been achieved. Elena allowed herself a brief moment of relief as the helicopter flew toward safer airspace. She had faced the impossible alone and emerged victorious, proving not just her skill, but her unwavering courage. The city below was still dangerous, still alive with threat, but she had made a difference. Tonight, she had survived, and so had those she had sworn to protect. The alley was narrow, suffocating, and filled with shadows that seemed alive. Elena and Mia had barely reached the extraction point before the enemy realized their position. Gunfire erupted, ricocheting off the walls of abandoned storefronts, the sound deafening and constant. Elena's heart pounded, not with fear, but with the precision of a soldier who knew every heartbeat mattered. "Stay close," she shouted to Mia, who was struggling to keep up, her wounds slowing her pace. Elena's eyes darted around, searching for cover, for angles, for any tactical advantage. The enemy had cut them off, pushing them into a choke point. But Elena refused to panic. She had faced impossible odds before, and she would do it again. A stack of wooden crates provided temporary cover. Elena crouched behind them, adjusting her rifle. Shadows moved at the far end of the alley, 2 guards advancing cautiously, aware of the danger. Her first shot was clean, taking down the closer one before he could alert his companion. The second guard faltered, firing wildly as he scrambled behind a dumpster. Elena fired again, precise and unflinching, and the threat was neutralized. Every step forward was a calculated risk. Bullets continued to strike nearby walls, sending splinters into the air. Smoke from fires and overturned vehicles thickened the air, making it hard to breathe. But Elena pushed on, dragging Mia toward the alley exit. Civilians trapped in the chaos cried for help, their voices mingling with gunfire and screams. Elena ignored nothing. Every life mattered. Suddenly, a grenade landed near their feet. Elena's reflexes kicked in instantly. She grabbed Mia and pushed her behind a large metal barrel, the explosion erupting with bone-shaking force. Shrapnel flew around them, tearing into the walls and asphalt. Elena's ears rang, but she kept moving, each motion purposeful, precise, and deadly. The alley had become a battlefield, and she was determined to control it. From her elevated vantage atop a small stairwell, she spotted enemy reinforcements moving into the alley. Her rifle cracked repeatedly, taking out each threat with lethal efficiency. She was a whirlwind of movement, fire, and strategy, never hesitating, never slowing, even as exhaustion gnawed at her muscles. Mia stumbled, blood streaking her uniform. Elena lifted her, dragging her through the chaos. The civilians behind them scrambled to safety, guided by her shouts and commands. She felt the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders, the mission, her partner, the innocent lives, and she bore it without complaint. Finally, they reached a side street leading to a makeshift safe house. Elena positioned herself at the entrance, rifle sweeping the street, covering the last steps of the civilians. One by one, they moved to safety, guided by her unwavering presence. The enemy was relentless, but Elena was more relentless still. She held the line until the last civilian was safe, her eyes never leaving the threat. When the alley fell silent, Elena allowed herself a moment to breathe. Her hands were raw from the rifle, her body trembling from adrenaline, but she had succeeded. Mia was safe, the civilians were safe, and the enemy had been held at bay. The city was still alive with danger, but for this moment, Elena had turned chaos into order. The rooftop extraction point was closer now, but danger lurked above as well as below. As Elena and Mia climbed the fire escape to reach the helicopter, a series of sharp cracks echoed through the night. A sniper's bullet ricocheted dangerously close, striking sparks off the metal staircase. Elena froze for a split second, her mind racing. She scanned every rooftop within sight. A glint of reflected moonlight revealed a sniper scope aimed directly at them. There was no time to hesitate. She shouted to Mia to get low and moved with precision, keeping her body behind the fire escape railing. The helicopter was visible now, its searchlight sweeping the rooftops. Every second counted. Elena knew that if they didn't reach the extraction point quickly, the sniper could pick them off one by one. She fired back toward the sniper, aiming not to kill, but to force him to move. The sudden volley of shots made the sniper duck, giving them a narrow window. Elena's legs burned as she helped Mia climb the final rungs. Each movement had to be exact. One misstep could be fatal. She kept her rifle raised, scanning every shadow, every possible hiding place. The helicopter hovered above, the ladder dangling invitingly, but the enemy was determined to prevent their escape. A grenade rolled toward them from the far edge of the roof. Elena's reflexes were instantaneous. She kicked it off the edge, sending it tumbling harmlessly downward. The explosion echoed below, a stark reminder that every second was a fight for survival. As they reached the edge of the rooftop, Elena hoisted Mia into the helicopter first. The rotor wash tossed her hair into her face, but she ignored it, keeping her focus on covering the rooftop. Enemy gunfire erupted again, bullets striking dangerously close. But Elena's aim was unwavering. Each shot was calculated, controlled, a testament to her training and determination. Finally, she climbed aboard, firing over her shoulder as the helicopter lifted off. The rooftop fell away beneath them, and for the first time that night, Elena allowed herself a brief sense of relief. They had survived the sniper's nest, they had escaped the city streets, and the mission, though nearly impossible, had been completed. From above, the city looked like a patchwork of chaos and fire, but also resilience. Elena had carried the weight of the mission, her partner, and the civilians through the night, proving not just skill, but courage. She had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, her resolve unbroken. The night was darker than usual, the kind of darkness that seemed to press in on Elena from all sides. She crouched behind the crumbling wall of an abandoned outpost, her rifle ready, every sense alert. The mission had changed. Extraction was no longer an option. They were behind enemy lines, cut off, and the only way out was forward. "Stay close," she whispered to her new teammate, Lara, a reconnaissance specialist. The younger woman nodded, her breathing controlled, eyes wide but steady. Elena knew fear. She had faced it countless times. But fear wasn't allowed to dictate actions. Every step, every movement, every breath had to serve the mission. The perimeter was heavily guarded. Towers bristled with searchlights, the hum of generators masking the soft crunch of their boots on gravel. Elena moved like a shadow, silent and deliberate, leading Lara through a maze of debris and fallen structures. Each corner could hide a patrol. Each shadow could conceal a sniper. Failure was not an option. As they approached the inner compound, Elena signaled a halt. 2 guards were visible, pacing in a pattern that seemed random but was actually predictable to her trained eyes. She gestured for Lara to cover the left flank while she crept forward. One shot from her suppressed rifle, and the first guard was down. Another followed quietly, falling without sound. The compound was breached, yet the tension never eased. Inside, the building was eerily quiet. Dust hung in the air, disturbed only by their careful steps. Elena scanned each doorway, every room, knowing the enemy could be anywhere. The hostages they were sent to rescue were inside, and time was critical. A single misstep could alert the entire garrison. Suddenly, a faint noise, a creak of floorboards, echoed from the hallway. Elena froze, signaling Lara to stop. She moved slowly toward the sound, her hand resting on the suppressor of her rifle. A soldier emerged from the shadows, startled. Elena's shot was instantaneous, silent, precise. She gestured for Lara to move forward, and together they advanced deeper into the building. They found the hostages in a locked room, guarded by 2 more soldiers. Elena and Lara worked in tandem, taking out the threats with silent efficiency. The captives, pale and terrified, looked up at them with a mixture of disbelief and hope. Elena gave a reassuring nod, signaling that the nightmare wasn't over, but help had arrived. "Move fast," Extraction is still hours away. We get them to the safe house on the roof, Elena whispered. They guided the hostages quietly, every step measured, every sound controlled. Outside, the enemy patrols continue their rounds, oblivious to the silent threat moving under their noses. Finally, they reached the stairwell leading to the rooftop. Elena took the first step, scanning for any sign of enemy snipers or traps. She knew the importance of patience, of moving with precision even under extreme pressure. The hostages followed, each step bringing them closer to freedom, but also closer to potential danger. On the rooftop, the extraction chopper waited, its lights cutting through the night like beacons of salvation. Elena positioned herself strategically, rifle raised, covering the hostages as they climbed aboard. Bullets began to ping off the roof as enemy forces discovered the breach. Elena fired with controlled bursts, buying just enough time for everyone to reach the safety of the helicopter. As the chopper lifted off, Elena finally allowed herself a brief sigh. The mission had been a success, but she knew the battle was far from over. Behind her, the enemy compound shrank into darkness, a reminder that every victory was temporary, every success hard-won. The helicopter had dropped them near the extraction zone, a high mountain pass that offered both cover and peril. Elena and her squad moved with caution, aware that the enemy knew the terrain as well as they did. Every step was a calculation. One wrong move could send them tumbling down steep cliffs or into an ambush. Snow crunched beneath their boots as the cold wind cut through their uniforms. The altitude made every movement exhausting, every breath a challenge. Elena led the squad, scanning constantly, her eyes sharp for any sign of movement in the rocky outcrops. Suddenly, a hail of gunfire erupted from above. The enemy had been lying in wait, hidden behind jagged rocks. Elena dropped to the ground, pulling her squad with her. Bullets tore through the snow and rocks, kicking up ice shards. She returned fire, each shot deliberate, aimed not just to hit, but to suppress. One of her team members went down, a bullet striking his shoulder. Elena moved to shield him, dragging him behind a boulder while directing another soldier to return fire. The mountain pass had become a deadly gauntlet, and every decision was a matter of life and death. Keep moving. Don't stop. Elena shouted over the roar of gunfire and wind. The squad scrambled forward, each step more dangerous than the last. Elena led the way, finding paths through the rocks that offered both cover and tactical advantage. Her body ached from the climb, the cold, the weight of her gear, but she could not falter. The enemy's position was heavily fortified, but Elena spotted a narrow ridge that offered a flanking route. She signaled her squad, and they moved quietly, carefully, aiming to surprise the enemy and relieve the pressure on the main group. As they advanced, Elena noticed a mine partially buried in the snow. One wrong step, and it could have been catastrophic. She marked it and guided her team around it, moving with the precision and calm of someone who had trained for exactly this kind of scenario. Finally, they reached a vantage point overlooking the enemy's position. Elena coordinated a concentrated volley, suppressing the ambush and giving her team the chance to advance. One by one, they moved past the enemy line, using the rocks for cover, until they reached the relative safety of a plateau above the ambush. Breathing heavily, Elena looked over her squad. Everyone was alive, though battered and exhausted. The mountain had tested them, pushed them to their limits, but they had survived because of discipline, training, and Elena's unyielding leadership. The extraction chopper would arrive at dawn. Until then, they would hold their position, regroup, and prepare for the final leg of the mission. Elena sat down for a brief moment, letting the cold seep into her bones, but her mind never stopped scanning, planning, anticipating. The enemy could strike at any moment. Survival depended not just on courage, but on vigilance, endurance, and unwavering focus. The snowstorm had intensified, whipping against Elena and her squad with a biting ferocity. Visibility was almost zero, and the once familiar mountain pass had turned into a treacherous maze. Yet retreat was not an option. The hostages were being moved, and time was running out. Every second counted. Eyes sharp, Elena whispered through the comms, her voice steady despite the storm. Her team nodded, their breaths visible in the freezing air. Each step was deliberate, calculated. As they navigated the icy rocks, Elena's training kicked in instinctively. Scan, assess, move. One wrong move could spell disaster. Suddenly, a faint sound, a snapping of ice underfoot, alerted her. Elena froze, signaling the squad to halt. A sniper? A trap? She couldn't be sure. Carefully, she raised her binoculars and scanned the ridge above. 2 enemy operatives had spotted them, crouched behind a jagged outcrop. Without hesitation, Elena aimed her rifle and took the first shot. Her bullet was silent but deadly. Lara covered the flank, taking out the second enemy soldier with precise, measured fire. The squad moved quickly, taking advantage of the brief pause to gain ground. Every move felt like a calculated gamble. The storm masked their sounds, but also their vision. They were ghosts in the blizzard, unseen yet constantly threatened. The path narrowed to a steep cliffside, forcing the squad to proceed single file. Elena went first, testing each foothold before committing her weight. Behind her, her squad followed, their eyes fixed on her movements. The extraction point was near, just beyond the treacherous ice field. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the mountainside. A landslide triggered by enemy explosives sent snow and rocks cascading toward them. Elena dove for cover, pulling Lara down with her. Bullets pinged off the nearby rocks as the enemy attempted to capitalize on the chaos. "Move, now," Elena shouted, adrenaline surging. They scrambled through the snow, sliding on ice, crawling over debris, until they reached a narrow ledge overlooking a frozen river. It was their only path forward. One slip, one miscalculation, and they would plummet into the ice below. Using ropes and climbing gear, Elena led her team down the cliff face, her focus razor-sharp. Every movement was measured, every decision weighed against the risk of death. The hostages' location was close, their urgency palpable. Elena refused to let fear dictate her actions. She couldn't. The lives of her squad and the hostages depended on her. Finally, they reached a concealed enemy encampment. Through the snow and wind, Elena could see the hostages being guarded by multiple armed soldiers. She signaled a tactical formation, instructing her team on a coordinated breach. As they moved in, gunfire erupted. Elena led from front, her rifle moving with deadly precision. She neutralized threats methodically, each shot calculated, each movement fluid and controlled. Lara provided cover fire, taking out anyone attempting to flank them. The hostages were panicked, but Elena remained a pillar of calm amidst the chaos. "Follow us. Move quickly," she commanded, ushering them toward safety. Explosions and gunfire echoed through the mountains, but Elena's focus never wavered. She was in her element, calculating, leading, surviving. After what felt like hours compressed into minutes, they reached the extraction point. A helicopter hovered in the storm, its rotors cutting through the blizzard with deafening intensity. Elena positioned herself to cover the hostages, firing on pursuing enemies just long enough for the last of them to climb aboard. As she finally prepared to board, a sniper's bullet struck near her shoulder, knocking her to the snow. Pain shot through her, but she dragged herself toward the helicopter. The last moments were a blur of effort, adrenaline, and sheer will. Finally, the helicopter lifted off, carrying her squad and the hostages to safety. Elena clutched the side of the craft, blood and snow mixing on her uniform, but alive and victorious. The helicopter cut through the stormy night sky, carrying the survivors to a secure base. Inside, the hostages wept and hugged their rescuers. Elena slumped against the wall, exhaustion weighing her down. Every muscle ached, her body battered from the relentless mission. A medic approached, checking her injuries. The bullet wound was serious, but not life-threatening. Elena gave a small nod of acknowledgement, brushing the snow and blood from her uniform. She had been pushed to the edge and beyond, yet the mission had succeeded. Every sacrifice had been worth it. Her team gathered around, sharing quiet words of relief. Laura clutched Elena's shoulder, eyes wide with gratitude. "We couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. Elena's lips pressed into a tight line. Leadership wasn't about praise, it was about responsibility, and she carried it heavily. Outside the helicopter, the storm raged on, a reminder that danger never truly ceased. Elena thought about those left behind, the battles yet to come, and the friends she had lost along the way. Courage wasn't just heroics, it was making impossible decisions under impossible circumstances every day. As the helicopter descended into the base, Elena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of relief and grief intertwined. The hostages were safe, her team had survived, and the mission was complete. But the cost was written in every scar, every sleepless night, every memory of fear and determination. She stepped off the helicopter, the cold hitting her face. Behind her, the snowstorm obscured the mountain pass they had conquered. Elena looked at her squad, each one battered, each one alive. They had been tested, pushed beyond human limits, and yet they had endured. Commanders awaited a debrief, but for Elena, the mission was more than a report. It was proof of what courage, leadership, and sacrifice could accomplish. She had faced death, fear, and exhaustion, yet she had never wavered. In the silence after the storm, Elena allowed herself a moment to reflect. The mission was complete, but her journey as a soldier and a leader was far from over. She knew that each challenge would be greater, each enemy more cunning, yet she was ready. The scars she carried were badges of survival, of resilience, of unwavering commitment to her duty and her comrades. Elena stood tall, despite her fatigue and injuries. She had led, she had fought, and she had triumphed. And though the battlefield would always demand courage, she had proven, above all, that a single soldier with determination and skill could change the outcome of the fight. Her story was one of sacrifice, endurance, and the indomitable spirit of a military girl who refused to surrender, even when everything seemed lost.